Okay, as we said, we dedicated this book to not one, but two wonderful teachers. Miss Stephanie Vanderslice is one of the best teachers in this part, in my opinion. I've only had her 4 times, so I feel like I said that. She's sweet, she's loving, and she's always there for her students, whether it's a writing problem or a life problem or a frantic advising issue of some sort. So I am pleased to introduce Miss Dr. Stephanie Vanderslice.
So I got here in the middle of that reading because I was at my son's school event, and thank you. I didn't hear the beginning, and I'm sure John told you, and if he didn't, I'll just sorry, Whitney's casting. So we are really, really, really touched that you are dedicating it, or whatever you call it, to us. It really, really means a lot, and so I just want to thank you. I mean, it means a lot to my dad, who used to be a college teacher, and I told him, he's like, oh, you have to send me your copies. So anyway, so we're going to be sending copies far and wide. Okay, so what I'm going to read is new. It's really new, so, but I'm not going to preface it because we had a conversation about prefaces in class this morning, and that would be a really bad idea. I do want to know, how many people here have read Jane Eyre? Good. Okay, because towards the end there's a reference to Jane Eyre. Well, there's one in the beginning too, but there's one you need in the end, and if you've read it, that helps. You don't need it completely to understand. So I'm reading this even though it's really new. In fact, it's a blog post, so I'm going to submit it soon, because I think it's really appropriate to tonight. So here we go. In praise of the author crush. It seems to be all about the crush these days. Man crushes, chick crushes, book crushes. When readers talk about their literary crushes, most are referring to characters in fiction. Indeed, plenty of articles, especially around Valentine's Day, breathlessly extol the virtues of, say, Wuthering Heights Heathcliff or War and Peace's Natasha. I shudder to think what it says about me that Jane Eyre's brash, arrogant Rochester has always set my heart aflutter. But when I casually mention my longtime infatuation with our author Charles Baxter in another post, it seemed to strike a chord. Suddenly, readers began confessing their own writer infatuations, and I discovered another strand of literary crush bubbling just below the surface, the author crush. Author crushes can arise for any number of reasons: a visceral connection to their work, a particularly charged meeting with them, or just because they happen to be good looking. I met Charles Baxter, the man and the writer, in 1991 when he came for a few days as visiting author at George Mason University, where I was studying fiction. Besides a gentle attractiveness, Charles Baxter, the man, exudes a preternatural intelligence and seems incapable of uttering an inconsiderate thought. On the subsequent occasions I have heard him speak or devoured his latest work, I have often wondered with a kind of awe what it must be like inside his head. Charles Baxter, the writer, is also responsible for some of my all-time favorite lines in contemporary literature. From the scene in Saul and Patsy Are Pregnant, when the title characters are making love against a windowsill. He felt as though 1,000 eyes, but not human eyes, were looking in on them with tender indifference. They were and were not interested. They would and would not care. They would and would not love them. Finally, they would turn away, as they tended to turn away from all human things in time. Since then, there's been Adam Gopnik, whose tender evocations of family life in Paris and New York, and From Paris to the Moon, and At the Children's Gate also stir my heart, but whose essay, The Last of the Metrozoids, in the latter book, pretty much takes my breath away. And of course, there's Neil Gaiman. No discussion of author crushes would be complete without a mention of Neil Gaiman, whose adoration among reading women is so well known as to have inspired online science fiction and fantasy journal TOR to publish Fiction World Rock as woman claims no sexual attraction in Neil Gaiman on April Fool's Day 2009. My son and I read Gaiman's The Graveyard Book together when it first came out, and while I think it was wonderful, more than Newbery-worthy book, it won the Newbery. I must admit I also met Gaiman when he visited our campus, and the man does possess a certain Clinton-esque je ne sais quoi. He sat across from me at dinner, and his gaze was so direct that for the whole 2 minutes we discussed creative writing programs in Great Britain, his home country. I felt as if I was the only woman in the world. So, yes, Neil Gaiman, enough said. I know it's not just me. For one friend, Chris Motto, poet Lee Young Lee hangs the moon. And as someone who also has certain lines of The City in Which I Love You memorized late in this century and on a Wednesday morning, I would tend to agree. For another friend, Colleen Rich, it's novelist Pat Conroy. For my former colleague Bonnie Selting, the moment she was able to express her fandom to Garrison Keillor at a live Harry Home Companion show years ago, that moment will remain etched in her memory. But I think my favorite author crush story comes from my friend Britton Gildersleeve, crushing on Robert Hayden. And she says this: when I began to make my writing public, Hayden was there for me. When I was recognizing I was a Buddhist. He was looking at oppression as I began to read critical theory. He never fit in, and he knew it. It became a point of honor for me. I could read Hayden and know it was okay to be smart, to adore poetry, to want to stay drunk on the roll of polysyllabics in your mouth. He was always there first. He literally kept me alive one terrible November. Hayden was short, almost blind, exceedingly homely, and the most beautiful poet you can imagine. If you're not familiar with his poem, Middle Passage on the Slave Crossings from Africa, it's profound, heart-wrenching, consummately crafted, and just downright awesome. I vote for Robert, anytime. Charles Baxter, Robert Hayden, Lee Young Lee. Obviously this post is incredibly hetero and Y-chromosome-centric in terms of the objects of its affections. It has also only just scratched the surface of the subject. I'm left wondering if men are moved in the same way by certain women writers, and if gay and lesbian readers likewise harbor writer crushes. Anyone care to weigh in? At any rate, author crush, man crush, chick crush, it's all in fun, right? Most of the time. There's one author crush I saved for last. When I hear him read aloud lines like, he closed his eyes as if even the meager light overhead represented too much pressure against his skull. The man's eyelids were a spoiled, full of a shade of red, oysters with the sunburn. All I can think is, wow, I share a bed. I share 2 sons, a dog, and 4 cats. I share a life with this guy because, reader, I married him.